killed Jane while her prized parrot peered from its perch. Gary Rask, a business partner of Jane Gill, now charged with killing her, was the major beneficiary of Gill's life insurance. But he says he didn't do it.
He had taken out nearly $2 million worth of insurance on her life. That was the motive that the prosecution presented for his killing Jane Gill.
I met Gary Rask at Fender's, a bar restaurant in San Jose. And then we started going out. I introduced him to Annette Bridges. And they told me that they wanted to be together. And that's how it was.
He bought me a Lexus. He bought me a really beautiful engagement ring, 2-point-something carat diamond. He would send me off shopping, all the time. I had gotten a wedding dress, the wedding veil, the bridesmaids' dresses, all the party favors. We had a mansion picked out. We had everything arranged to be married for March 21st. He ended up murdering Jane, so we never got married. I had a big part in this whole trial. I was the key witness. I was the person who really put him behind bars.
Jane was Gary's partner. They were supposed to develop the land that they bought in Fresno.
He told me he was going to go to Fresno, that he had to meet 2 businessmen. Later on that evening, I had received 2 phone calls from him. He just wanted to say hi to me, and that was it. It was a really brief conversation. The next morning, he came home. He seemed really nervous. He was pacing. And I asked him, what was the matter with you? And he said, I was supposed to meet up with Jane Gill. She never showed. She owes me $30,000. So the next morning, we went over to Jane's mansion. I had no idea she was dead. I had no idea she was, in her mansion dead. I didn't know. I didn't even know she was living in Sonoma.
Sort of a grotesque scene because of the way she was lying. She was spread-eagled on her back. She had sort of a loose gown on. It almost appeared that it was a sexual crime.
Gary was the one who found her dead in the mansion. He called 911.
Police, reporters. I couldn't see him. He was on the other side of the fence. And the first thing he asked me is after he was done being questioned was, what did you tell them? And I asked him, I said, what do you mean, what did I tell them? I told them whatever, what you went to Fresno, they asked me about you. And I told him. He asked me, did you tell him I called you twice? And I said, yeah. He was mad that I had told him he had called me. That's when I said, Gary, something's wrong. I said, do you have anything to do with this? And he says, no. And I said, Gary, with you going to Fresno, with you worrying about these calls, I said, something's wrong here. What's going on? That's when he says, yes. I hired a hitman. He told me he had hired a hitman to kill Jane.
Then he confessed to her, I hired a hitman to kill her. My life is now in your hands, you gotta help me.
You can't say anything. The hitman's gonna know you know, and you're gonna be killed next. He says, both of us will. I kept saying, are you serious? Are you telling me the truth? It just seemed like a nightmare. I asked him how he got this hitman. He said him and his brother had known about this guy in New Jersey. He had looked his name up on not Yellow Pages, but he called like 411. He said the hitman asked him for his shoe size, Gary's shoe size. Was there guns? Were there knives? I mean, was there bullet holes? He goes, no, there was nothing like that. Gary was telling me things that he had to do. He had to cover up some other tracks. He told me he had went into the mansion and he had gotten some tapes. He said he had gotten some cigarette butts out of an ashtray, moved them from the kitchen to the bedroom to throw the police off tracks because he never smoked. I couldn't believe it was happening, and he acted like it was nothing. So I always was questioning, I wonder if he had done it himself. But I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to really believe that. In your mind, you don't want to believe something like that, especially the guy you're about to marry. And having a hitman, I know it's not nothing, any better, but it's better to me than doing it yourself, takes a lot of guts. It takes some lunatic to kill someone yourself. He had told me so many times that they were gonna, electrocute him or whatever. All he said was, just remember that I'll always love you or something.
On November 27, Annette Bridges went crazy because she found a phone bill that had 4 of his ex-girlfriend's numbers and accused him of still having an affair with us. She mentioned that she will make sure that he's 6 feet under or will spend the rest of his life in jail.
I found a phone bill, which I had never seen this whole time Gary and I were together. I've never seen not one cellular phone bill, not one Pacific phone bill, no phone bills at all. He's always hid them from me. And these were like Evelyn Bruce's numbers, these were Lori Collins' numbers. Well, I got on the phone with one girl, and she said she's been, meeting him at hotels right then and there. I knew this guy is using me. He's just using me for his alibi.
She told him she intended to tell the police.
I locked myself in the bathroom because I wanted to call my mom, and I had we had a mobile phone, one of those cordless phones. So my mother says, okay, I'll be right there. And in the meantime, Gary got in with a knife in the bathroom. And I grabbed the knife out of his hand and threw it in the bathtub. And then I punched him. And I just kept punching him and, knocked him out.
Annette Bridges went to the authorities and told lies.
I told them, I said, get me on a polygraph, do whatever you have to. I'm telling you the truth. Just believe me.
His calling card was used in Sonoma County at 7:42 p.m. the night of the slaying, when he was trying to make his fiancée Bridges believe that he was in Fresno. Making a telephone call was so second nature to him that he didn't think about leaving that paper trail. In my experience, covering courts for 40 years, they always make one little mistake.
When he was supposed to be in Fresno, he was in Sonoma and he used a calling card. And the only person who lives in Sonoma that he knows was Jane.
I'd received a call from the coroner saying that they have a bird that had been involved in a murder. I said, fine, we'll take care of it. We took him in and we cleaned him up and gave him a fresh cage and fresh food. And as soon as he was filled, he started talking. First thing out of his mouth was, "Richard, no, no, no." And it was like, oh my God. Second thing he did was the knock on the window.
The parent, Max, could very well have witnessed the killing because he was right there. I mean, just a few feet away in his cage. Whether the utterances of Richard, no, 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 related to what the parent saw is the question.
I called the DA's office and said, "Hey guys, you need to know what's going on with this bird." It was a very sharp Richard, and the no, no, no's were as though there was no air getting to her throat.
Initially, I came to know Max. He was taken to a nearby pet store, which some friends of mine owned. And I was there about an hour after the sheriff's department had brought him in, and he was a bit stressed, I guess, hadn't been fed for a few days. Pretty intriguing seeing him all of a sudden in a pet store, knowing that this bird had been at the crime scene. Just everybody was in awe seeing him, and, you know, even I was. I was actually the first person to pull him out of his cage at the pet store. He eventually came to me and came out of the cage, and the first words out of his mouth were in this lady that had been murdered's voice, and it was pretty frightening, figuring that this bird had supposedly been with her for quite some time, to hear her voice come out of this little gray bird.
Birds generally respond to emotional impact. If he was, in fact, in the room with Jane, he must have seen something very emotional that happened.
It's said that he's been heard to say no, 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 and Richard, which I've heard him say all of those words, but never put in context together. But I did hear him use the word no. He knew how to use the word no. He knew when to use it. Such if you were to walk up and scare him, he might yell at you, no. He was a pretty smart gray, really. But as to stand up and say, yeah, I saw that murder on the night of such and such, as hardly.
Who is Richard? Who is this Richard?
There were other people, other than Mr. Rasp, that may have had opportunity and motive for killing Jane Gill, a man named Richard. According to his own testimony, he was the last person to see her alive the night before the killing. They had known each other for some time. They were close friends, not girlfriend, boyfriend. He claimed there was no intimate relationship, although they did share a condominium.
She was borrowing money from people. She borrowed a lot of money from Richard Mattoon. She actually used Richard Mattoon's mother's house to borrow about $300,000. He came back to collect the money, and there was no money there. Richard Mattoon and Jane Gill were not just friends. They're the ones that used to live together. They didn't investigate his alibi, though.
When he took the stand, he denied that he made those calls from Sonoma County. He claimed that Miss Gill made them. One of the strangest things was a telephone call made to Evelyn Bruce from San Francisco. He used a payphone and he used change that he had in his pocket. Whereas in all the other telephone calls, he used his calling card.
He called me around 6:30 and told me that if I have time to work on his tax return, he will come over, and he was with me till about midnight. I know he didn't do it. He was with me while she was being killed.
The alibi by Evelyn Bruce threw a monkey wrench into the prosecution's case.
The only thing they've got was the phone call and Annette. She claims she knew a guy who has a mafia connection. Gary told me it's crazy. She won't do that. And I told Gary, no, I'm just scared. Don't ever tell her that you were with me Sunday night.
Evelyn Bruce knows he's guilty. She's in love with Gary. She'll do anything for Gary. That was their story, that they were together that night doing income taxes at midnight. They weren't together at all.
After you know Annette, you'll doubt everything that she says. She could cry, pray, and lie at the same time. She tried to commit suicide twice, and she convinced me she was a nurse, but I found out that the reason why she knows terminologies of being a nurse is because she was in a nut house.
He seemed to really have a lot of love for her, because he would say, Max, I love you. Max, you're so sweet. Max, your mom's good boy. And it was her voice.
I'm sure that bird did not pick up no, no, Richard from that. If anything, it would be saying no, no, Gary, ugh.
I really feel that Max saw something just by his response, and if there was a way to get inside that little head and play back what it was he saw, it would be great.
The parrot knows a lot.
Does it bother you that you can actually be that close to a person and think that you don't really ever know them?
Yes, I don't think nobody knows Gary, though. Nobody does. I don't even think he knows his own self, you know. There's just too many personalities in there. He would get the truth and stretch it a lot. You know, he would just hide a lot of things. He would block a lot of things out. Or he would just make everything crazy. I mean, you know, so crazy that you don't even know if it's the truth. Everything was a joke to Gary. He wasn't too serious of a guy. He was always the type of guy that wanted to go out and have fun. He was a joker. And the bird is nothing but a big joke, because the former owner who owned it before Jane had a little boy named Richard. And they always said, no, no, Richard, no, no. And that's how the bird started saying, no, no, Richard. That's the whole story. I mean, I don't think the bird learned that in a few minutes. I think it took him a lot longer. I don't care how smart the bird is. You know, it takes us forever just to teach my daughter to say ball, you know. He's desperate, you know. That's what desperate people do.
The judge eventually ruled that any mention of Max and what he said was irrelevant.
Why couldn't they just take 5 minutes to listen?
They found him guilty. They found him guilty of first degree with special circumstances. He killed for economic gain. The only sentence that he could get was life without parole.
What if he hires somebody that's going out of prison to come and get me for ruining his whole life? You know, telling on him.
My husband sold Max, and we put him on a parrot protection plan so that nobody could fit him for little cement shoes. I would like to have Max back. I really miss him. He's so funny.
I just feel bad. I was the one who introduced him to Annette. She took everything.
At that time, I thought I was in love with him, yes. Now I don't know if it was in love or infatuation or lust. I'm not even sure of that anymore. All I know is I don't love him. Now. I guess I made out pretty lucky. I have a great husband. You know, I trust him. You know, I don't think he's going to go murder somebody.
Richard, no, no, no. It was like, listen to me. Somebody pay attention. I did, and I tried. But Nobody wanted to hear. I think it's a grave injustice to the person that's in jail. They didn't find out who Richard is and what his relationship is to this case. They didn't take a look at what Max had to offer.